Talofa lava, this is Pacific Waves from RNZ Pacific. I'm Susana Suisuki. Coming up, after 9 months, PNG will present a motion for a vote of no confidence. Also,
we at Liva have witnessed an increase in these negative and racist comments on our platforms.
A Pacific health provider backs the findings from the BSA report, and
because it's important for our young people to celebrate what makes them awesome.
Young Pasifika and Māori school students go all out. On Thursday, MPs in the Papua New Guinea Parliament will be presented with a motion for a vote of no confidence in Prime Minister James Marape. The quest for a vote has dominated PNG politics all year, and it's finally set to happen when Parliament resumes after a week-long recess. But as our PNG correspondent Scott Whitey told Don Wiseman, Mr Marape could well hold on to his position.
Yeah, so the Prime Minister is confident that his numbers are intact and that there will be some movement back and forth, but he's confident of retaining government after Thursday. The opposition has on record a slightly lesser number. On 38, I think, is the number that they're stating. They also expect a few MPs to move from government to opposition. So it's that narrative on both sides that Papua New Guineans are dealing with. On today's paper, the member for Kandep, Don Pollier, has come out stating that the Prime Minister, both the Prime Minister and Rainbow Paita, who's the alternate Prime Minister, should put aside their differences and put aside their egos and work for the betterment of the country. I mean, put aside the vote of no confidence even. So Don Pollier has stated on the media that he's been trying to get both parties to a table, but that hasn't been successful. So he's been staying in government, return to government.
He means a grand coalition, doesn't he?
Yes, and that's also highly unlikely given the fragmented state of PNG politics.
Chris Haiveta, again a former member of the government, he's slammed the government this week for a rapidly growing deficit.
Yes, he's made a few statements as well, apart from that particular, the problems with the economy. He's talked about the funds going to the Gulf province, the funds that were supposed to go to the Gulf province that haven't reached the Gulf province. And again, he's drawn criticism from within the Gulf province and outside of the Gulf province, also questioning him where the previous funds have been spent. So it's sort of a double-edged sword for him, that thrust against the government, criticizing James Marape over his handling of the economy.
There are as well, aren't there, a number of MPs who remain in the middle, not really committed either way?
Yes, there are a number of MPs who have remained. The former Health Minister, Dr. Lino, has also indicated at some level that he will remain in the middle, but he's stated that his resignation should be seen as a protest against the government and against the Prime Minister over his handling of issues, including law and order, which has been a big issue for the Enga province where he comes from.
He was also very upset about the way in which the health portfolio had been treated.
Yes, that's been one of his biggest frustrations. I mean, the Prime Minister's made political statements, but the support that the Health Ministry has been getting, and particularly the Health Ministry and the Health Department has been getting, has been very limited in terms of the budgetary support. For instance, the 300 million was promised, 160 million was actually allocated, so that's impacted things like medicines and transport and nearly every other function within the health sector.
Now, just as an aside, I see during the Pacific Islands Forum that Papua New Guinea, cash-strapped Papua New Guinea, gave a significant grant to little old Niue.
Yeah, Papua New Guinea will always try to be seen as a power in the region as much as it tries to be. So we've had previous prime ministers who have given grants to Pacific Island countries, including Solomon Islands more recently, and now James Marape giving some money to Niue amidst all the problems that we have in the country at the moment. So yeah, it's irritated quite a few people.
The Refugee Action Coalition welcomes a federal court decision to award 2 children detained offshore in Nauru from the Australian government for medical negligence and abdicating its duty of care. As AAP reports, the court heard the government failed to provide appropriate medical treatment and reunification with the father of the second case. The father and child were kept apart for more than 18 months, and it was alleged the son developed symptoms of psychological injury. Spokesperson Ian Rintol told Lydia Lewis there's a long and well-established record of abuse against children on Nauru.
It's a very welcome decision. It's not entirely surprising, because there had been a previous finding that the Australian government was responsible for the conditions of refugees, on Nauru, and there is a long and very well-established record of the mistreatment and abuse, of children, both in terms of the circumstances of the detention centres themselves from the very early days of the heat, the lack of water, the limited, medical facilities that were in the tents when initially people were transferred there, to the lack of education, the stilted, education facilities, even when they were placed into the kind of community schools, there was, systemic racism and discrimination against them. There was the mould. I mean, I could go on, but in the end, there was quite a serious campaign that was, led by the demonstrations in Nauru, in Australia, and then with legal action that actually won decisions in the federal court for children to be emergency evacuated from Nauru because of the imminent danger to their life. We actually saw situations where increasing numbers of young children, teenagers, even younger, were demonstrating what was called resignation syndrome, and that was meaning many of them were on starvation, had withdrawn, had become unresponsive. And so there was a series of court cases actually won, the court orders for the Australian government to bring children from Nauru to Australia for emergency medical treatment because of the danger to their life. And that ultimately led to, the big campaign for all the children off Nauru and ultimately everyone off Nauru.
And in these particular cases, the second case, for example, was a child who was kept away from his father for more than 18 months, and then it was alleged that the son developed symptoms of psychological injury. Is this an isolated case, or is this an issue that you have heard time and time again?
There would be a number of similar kinds of cases. There are many instances in which, sometimes because of just punitive responses by the government and by Transfield, I think, was operating at the time, just punitive actions against individuals, which did mean that that fathers were actually separated from children, sometimes children separated from their families and placed in separate camps when people were in closed camps. That wasn't uncommon when there were protests or demonstrations. It was a way in which the government and the services there actually responded. So there would be many other instances, but far more general is just the psychological trauma that was inflicted on people because of closed detention, the uncertainty, the abuse that people suffered. Very often it was that the trauma that children experience because of the abuse of their and mistreatment of their parents, as well as themselves in the ways that I've described.
And there are refugees and asylum seekers being detained again on Nauru, even after this latest cohort has been removed. Do you know if any children are being held there, and what lessons can be learned?
I don't believe there are children there now. I think there was children. The children have been a part of the transfers when they've been picked up, children at sea and brought to. I don't know of any children that are on Nauru at the moment, but the general circumstances are going to prevail. The people who are on Nauru at the moment have no resettlement prospects, so they're effectively indefinitely on Nauru. We know many of them have already been found to be refugees. We're going to see a situation is going to emerge very quickly on Nauru. There's already evidence of it in terms of medical neglect because of the lack of medical services for the refugees. The government having wound back a lot of the services that were there simply are not prepared for the numbers of refugees that have come there. The same kind of problems of accessing the general Nauru government, the Ron Hospital facilities are emerging again as was the case. So we are going to see the same kind of psychological trauma. Again, there's already some evidence of that because refugees, having been found to be refugees, are now beginning to understand that there is no future. There's no resettlement program There's at the moment, no prospect. The Australian government is still insisting that they, won't be brought to Australia. There is no agreement with New Zealand, so I think we can expect all the horrors that were characterised. The offshore detention on Nauru are simply going to re-emerge again.
A Pacific Wellbeing organisation says they've seen an increase in discriminatory comments towards their communities through harmful content online. It backs findings from a recent report which showed half of New Zealand's diverse audiences avoid broadcast media due to perceived racist comments, anti-Māori views, biased commentary on the Palestine-Israel conflict, or references to people being labelled criminals or terrorists. Alicia Foon spoke with Levar Chief Executive Denise Kingi-Uluave to find out more.
We at Levar have witnessed an increase in these negative and racist comments on our platforms, particularly around ill-informed belief that Pacific communities are in some way being advantaged by, when providing culturally specific resources to our communities. That's been an increase that we've noticed over the last 3 to 5 years, particularly, following COVID, when people felt that they had the right to just present some ill-informed information and misinformation. And so we are noticing that within our organisation. But we also know that those listening to the misinformation out there, that can incite conflict and aggression in those that aren't that informed. And so if we look at the example when David Seymour made disgraceful comments directed at Ministry of Pacific Peoples last year or the year before, we saw threats and even people entering the Ministry of Pacific Peoples building that was right next to us in Auckland, causing significant trauma to the staff there. And so we are very concerned about the lack of accountability and responsibility, and in some ways an avoidance by the media, and particularly mainstream media, in addressing some of this behaviour that's happening.
Pasifika don't usually feel that comfortable to, address confrontation head on. It's not usually something that we do, and so they seem to respond the most out of any other diverse group within New Zealand to say we are facing a lot of harm, particularly on social media outlets, and we are seeing offensive material. Most of respondents said they would tune off from television and some news outlets too, just because of past experiences. And so I guess when it comes to complaining or taking it a step further, if they see something and they're not feeling safe, usually there'd be a discussion with family, but it wouldn't go further than that. So what advice do you have, and what would you suggest if Pasifika come across harmful content?
Raising public awareness of the damage that this does cause. I mean, that people seem to have a good appreciation of that, but then what to do after that. And while we have a culture of, as you say, being quite respectful and humble and not tending to want to complain about things, I think once it's the way we present it to our communities in terms of, this is not a complaint, this is our responsibility, this is our accountability, so reframing it, I suppose, and providing education and information about how you go about doing this in a respectful way, I think can have an impact in terms of people speaking up, as long as they feel that they are doing that in a that is in line with their cultural values. We find that our communities can, what would you say? They can respond to things differently than what they've always done. But again, as I said, that takes education to our communities, helping them to understand how this standing up for the harmful that this is doing in our communities kind of ignites them to take action in a way that, as I mentioned, still holds to their values and the way they do that.
Students in the largest city in Aotearoa have been showcasing their culture The All Out Showcase has given young people a positive platform to explore identity and culture. Coco Lance was at the event.
On Friday evening, a collaboration of students across over 10 different schools in Auckland came together to celebrate students' culture, identity and talents with the All Out Showcase, which included guest judges and prizes. The event was held at Onehunga High School and organised by a passionate, whānau-led group, Lalanga, Te Iti Kahurangi, a Māori and Pasifika kahui ako support group that brings together families of students and education providers to support young people in reaching their full potential.
I joined Lalanga because my personal experience in high school, and I know it still carries on today, wasn't as great as it's been. And what Lalanga is doing is actually empowering our students and getting our whānau to engage more and help where they can in school and outside of school. And if there's any support that they need, our school is willing to go out of our way to help where we can.
It's great to be here today because it's important for our young people to celebrate what makes them awesome, their individuality, their identity, and it's good to have some positive events just to counter some of the negative stereotypes that are out there about being young and brown.
That was Coco Lance reporting from Auckland's Onehunga High School for the All Out Pacific Showcase. You can find the video version of the story on our RNZ Pacific Facebook page. That's Pacific Waves for today. For all episodes, head over to rnz.co.nz/Pacific. We're also on Spotify, Apple and iHeartRadio. From myself and the RNZ Pacific team, tō whā sui fua.